there was like a spiritual seeker who went to the meditating master and was like, I would love to start meditating. How long should I meditate for? And the master replies, oh, 15 minutes. And the seeker says, oh, I don't have 15 minutes. And then the master says, an hour. We gain more time by doing these practices. We gain deeper connections by taking the time for ourselves. We think like, oh, I'll push my meditation away, or I won't go to, do that movement class that feels good, or I won't go for that walk because I need to be with my kids right now, not realizing that 1 hour, 10 minutes, 1 minute is actually going to make our connection better.
Welcome to Parent Footprint with Dr. Dan. I'm Dr. Dan. This show is about making the world a more loving, accepting, and compassionate place, one parent, one person, and one child at a time. The key to raising healthy and engaged kids is for us parents to seek the same in our own lives while striving to be the best versions of ourselves each day. No matter who you are or where you came from, with increased awareness, you can be purposeful about leaving a healthy footprint for your children, your family, and all those you care about while living your own life to the fullest. Today's show is The Yoga of Parenting with Sara Ezrin. Sara is an author, freelance writer, yoga educator, and content creator based in the Bay Area. Her willingness to be unabashedly honest and vulnerable, along with her innate wisdom, make her writing, teaching, and social media great sources of healing and connection for many, many people. Sara writes extensively on the subjects of yoga, parenting, and mental health, often interweaving these themes. Her work ranges from heavily reported assignments to personal essays to blog content for brands. She's a regular contributor to Yoga Journal Magazine, Motherly, Yoga International, Healthline, Scary Mommy, Mind Body Green, Mantra Magazine, and LA Yoga Magazine. She has also been featured in the Wall Street Journal, Forbes Magazine, Bustle, LA Weekly, and NBC News. And finally, Sara is the author of her new book, which we are going to dive into today, The Yoga of Parenting, 10 yoga-based practices to help you stay grounded, connect with your kids, and be kind to yourself. Sara, welcome to the show.
Dr. Dan, I didn't know you were going to read the whole bio. Someone should have said, so if anyone's still even listening to the episode, I appreciate you.
I chose. I had options for short bio, longer bio, and I sat with it. And believe it or not, I took a few things out, but it's like this, I wanted it all there for you, for everyone.
I love it.
Yes.
No, I so appreciate it. And it's always like awkward hearing about it, but at the same time, I think it's important for us parents, especially to do this into parenting too, which is like that, just looking back at how far we've come, right? So whether it's career or where we are in our parenting journey, it is important to take that pause and look back. I'm always the one like climbing up the hill. I never really stop and look at the view. So thank you. I appreciate that. I appreciate
am with you. Yes, I am with you on that climb and working hard to climb less and to what we're going to talk about today is continue to be more present. And also, yeah, it's really weird when your bio is read and there's part of you that says like, who is that? Like, what? Who? Yeah. Like, and so yeah, take it in because you have accomplished a lot. And now having read your book, which I want to say is piece part memoir and feeling like I know you even better. It's been a journey. It has been a complete journey.
It has been a long journey. I have to share this. I've never told anybody this, but that bio, my dad wrote some of it for me. I was updating my website and I had sent him my old bio and he's the one, because like normally you write it for yourself and you're writing it in third person and there's like that whole thing. But my dad wrote a lot of it too, which was kind of cool to like even see it from a different perspective. So shout out to my dad. That was great. Yeah, yes. The book it's a lot of layers to it. And I couldn't, what originally inspired me to write it was, I mean, there's a long, and I'm sure you're going to ask about that, but like
Yes.
my original intention was really to showcase all the other stories in it. But my first pass, my editor's like, no, we need a little bit more of you in here. And, to stand, I guess this is going to be our theme of our conversation, which is standing confidently in your power and where you are. And I'm actually really happy that I wove in all of that. I know there's quite a bit of very personal information,
Mm-hmm.
but it's just how I process things. And so
Mm-hmm.
if I can use that, these are all different teaching tools, right? So I use a pose to teach something, but I'll also use story. And,
Mm-hmm.
that's, if it can help people in any way, then, it's
Mm-hmm.
well worth it. And it's always
Well,
opportunities for connection.
and personal story and other
Mm,
stories of other parents, parents that are known to us in the world, and then parents who are also just like all of us, just regular parents. And I have to say, the foreword by Jen Pasteloff,
mm,
your good friend, and Jen has been on the show. And after reading, well, first Jen's amazing forward, and then reading your book, it's no wonder you both are kindred spirits, because the power that you both bring to authenticity and
mm,
vulnerability and just rawness is disarming. And you laid it out like piece by piece of your life comes into the chapters. It's like, oh wow, that was another a big trial or tribulation or success, or man, okay, that was something you had to go right. Like you just kind of feed it out in this way that as I was going through your book, it's just like it just feels really easy to be open and real and reflect on oneself because you are doing it in such an open and compassionate way.
Well, I really appreciate that. I think I'm just going to echo the shout out to our dear friend Jen Pasteloff. She really was a trailblazer in all of this. I mean, I remember those early days of like Facebook. It was like,
Mhm,
I don't even think Instagram was around at the time because we started out together in 2008. And she would post something that was so just I mean, it was literally like a diary entry. And
mhm,
I remember feeling like it's like what you're saying, right? It's those feelings that it evokes in me, where I've always loved group therapy settings, and that's something I
mhm,
talk about in the book, is like, I've been in therapy a long time. But I think I was like, wow, we can use social media in this forum now. And so I,
mhm,
I have to say Jen was a real trailblazer in that. So I can't take any credit as a pioneer, but I was definitely on her bandwagon right behind her. And it's been really cathartic to be able to share in that way. I mean, I think social media has been particularly helpful for that. But then the book was this longer form, and it's also like memorialized. So it's like this
mhm,
one capsule, which is, there's something really cool about that too. But
mhm.
it's
Yes.
and now sharing is my absolute favorite thing to do. I mean, it's and I don't even want to say now sharing, because I've always been an oversharer, but just having these forums to be able to do that, and to connect with people on these levels that people don't often talk about. I
Mhm,
think that's
mhm.
part of it, is bringing to light the parts that are traditionally considered dark, to only see that
Right,
it's those
right.
darkest spots that actually make our light the brightest.
Well, and when people like you do that, it gives the courage to others to share with, whether it's on social media or their small group or their family. It's like, okay, wait, Sarah can do that. I can do that. And there's a ripple effect.
I mean, I hope so.
Yeah. Okay. So let's, yoga. I want to start with this quote from you, which I love. I've been meditating for nearly 30 years and practicing asana, the physical practice, for over 20. And I can say without a doubt that the most advanced yoga I have ever done is raising children. I love that. And I know you're speaking the truth.
Hmm. Well, I think it also, like, it's like, how do we define yoga? Right. And I'm laughing because recently I was thinking like, oh, I think partnership with two young kids might be the hardest post.
Mhm,
And now, like, we weren't quite there yet. I only had one kid when I started to write the book, because I was pregnant with our second. And now I'm like, maybe partnership and young
mhm,
children is the most advanced. But really, like, what is yoga? And so, when we think of the word yoga, often in the West, we picture someone doing something with their body. They're in a physical shape.
Mm-hmm.
But when we go back to the root of the word and we look at the Sanskrit language, which was a really cool language, because unlike English and other counterparts where it's one word, one meaning, in the Sanskrit language, there's often one word to convey many different meanings. And so the term yoga, like we know it as a practice here in the West, and it is a philosophy. There is a specific capital Y yoga. But the
Mm-hmm.
word lowercase yoga is also used to describe a sum, like in math, like adding
Mm-hmm.
together, an
Mm-hmm.
astrological conjunction, a marriage. It's often used to describe something that has to do with union and unification. So when we look at it like on that level, and we're just looking at like what's the essence of this word? What is it actually trying to mean to us? I take it and I'd be like, I don't want to be rewriting any text or anything. I feel like what I've read is that it's about connection and
Mm-hmm.
unification. So if
Mm-hmm.
that's the case, then parenting is yoga, relationships of any kind are yoga, even that deeper connect, and especially that deeper connection to yourself. So
Mm-hmm.
starting to see my relationships as my practice, it helped change my perspective in a lot of different ways. I mean, it helped me start to appreciate the challenges of them in those moments and
Mm-hmm.
the growth edge, but also to really understand that, like, I was so attached to my body and to my practice for so long, and that
Mm-hmm.
was just a gate. It really was just a door opening up to the deeper connection, which is connection to other or connection to self.
Parenting is yoga, everyone. Whether you know it
Mm.
or not, you have been doing a form of yoga, which is why at times it is difficult to breathe and difficult to contort all aspects of your inner self, let alone your outer self, in the parenting journey. Let's go back to your beginning with yoga, your first relationship with yoga, and how that started and how it has evolved over the past several years.
Yeah, so I have to give my credit to my dad again. I feel like, my
Mhm.
parents have been, I mean, as they should. And this is exactly what your whole podcast is about and your movement. This is
Mhm.
the footprints, right? My dad left
Yes.
a footprint, but in a way that's maybe not what you're thinking. So people probably are imagining that he was a yoga practitioner. That was not it at all. He sent me a box. It was like a gag gift box when I turned 19. Okay. This is
Mhm.
2001. And in it was like all this stuff to imply that I was getting older and I needed to take care of myself. Like
Mm.
things that, like, now as a 41-year-old, I'm like at the products I'm actually currently using. But, at 19, I was like, oh, this is hilarious. And one of which was a VHS tape. It was a yoga VHS tape. And my
Mm.
roommate and I popped it in, ready to laugh. And within seconds, we were like moving furniture out of the way, putting out our cigarettes, and starting to do the movements. And here we are. So that was 2001. We're 22 years later.
Yeah.
She's a fairly well known yoga teacher in the Pacific Northwest. I've been
Wow.
teaching for the last 15 years. We both continued this love affair, and it all started as I don't it was just like a passing thing. I mean, not in
Wow.
any way to compare myself to like
Yeah.
Einstein, but it's like, when Einstein's dad like gave him a compass, it's like, this is exactly what you talk about on your show. It's that footprint and that
Huh.
imprint of like the little things that we give our kids, and you never know like what's going to be sparked. And it became my life very quickly.
That is awesome. I'm imagining, your dad grabbing like a Jane Fonda like jazzercise VHF, at a like a flea market or a garage sale, like putting in the box. Like that's sort
Yes.
of like, this is just going to be a blast. And
It was probably like
look
Barnes
at
and
that.
Noble, right? Because it was like
Right.
2001. So yeah, he was probably
Right.
like, and here's like your AARP card and all these things, thinking he's being so funny. And
Yeah.
I'm like, little did you know. But I think
Wow.
there also was a subconscious desire in there because I wasn't on the right path. I wasn't. I was in a really unhealthy place, and battling my own stuff with addiction at the time. And so, as
Mhm.
much as it was like ha ha funny, I think there was this unconscious, or maybe it was very conscious, we should ask him, a desire to redirect me and to get me
Right.
on a different path. And it absolutely did. It was like
Wow.
instantaneous.
Wow. Do you recall what it was? What the grab was? I mean, obviously for you and your friend, like there's something that just took hold.
I was just thinking about it as like I'm recalling the story to you, and I'm like, what was it that really made us, to actually get serious and want to pay attention, because we really did put it in with the intention of laughing. And I
Mm-hmm.
think what it was, like, I'm like picturing it. I can feel it. I could like remember our VHS and like the stack that our like, little square TV
Mm-hmm.
was on. I think it was hearing the breathing, honestly, the breathing in that video. So the video was Ganga White and Tracy Rich, who own the White Lotus Foundation in Santa Barbara. Ganga was one of the first owners of Center for Yoga, which was one of the first yoga studios in all of LA. So the roots
Mm.
are very, very, very deep in this lineage. And it was a vinyasa flow, which is like all about breathing and moving. And I just remember hearing the breath. I'd never heard breath like that before. I mean, I'm
Mm.
pretty sure there wasn't any breathing going on in my house growing up. And, I definitely, other than, that's probably why actually I loved smoking, right? It's like, other than smoking cigarettes, I was, holding my breath a lot of the time.
Mm-hmm.
But hearing the whooshing, we call it ujjayi breath. It was like, yeah, I mean, you use the word disarming. Like, that's what I think it felt like. It was
Mm-hmm.
just like, oh, okay, like this is real. Like, what is that? I remember thinking, like, is that a sound maker, or is this actually coming from these humans? And then we started to do it too. Ooh, this embodiment moment that,
Mm-hmm.
I'd been fighting most of my life to be out of my body. And it
Mm-hmm.
was this beautiful welcoming back into myself.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And I really um was like intrigued by the paradox that you described of your life. And I know so many of us struggle with when we're seeking health. So on the one hand, you are you are not, per your own report, having a healthy lifestyle. There's some issues with addiction. There's some issues with eating. And yet, because you're a striver, which I relate to, right? A climber, an achiever, you are like going hardcore into health, right? You are
Mm,
exercising, you're doing yoga several times a day, you're eating healthy, and I'm putting that in quotes, right?
yep.
Uber healthy, to a point that your outsides and actions and practices were seemingly healthy, but you're finding, wait, it took a while for your insides, for lack of a better word, right, to come into resonance in your journey.
Yeah. Yeah, it was like I swung way to the other side of the spectrum. I went from like
Yeah.
staying up every night till 5 to like waking up every day at 5, and from eating anything to not eating anything. I mean, I always, I've been in and out of eating restrictive eating my whole life, but there was also just this kind of pressure in the wellness community, and I don't want to blame the community because I'm the one who chose to do it, but at the
Mm-hmm.
time, thinness was extremely valued, hyper flexibility. Success was defined by the postures and the shapes that you could make with your body. And the style of yoga that I was very into, I got into Ashtanga yoga and got really deep into it, which is a very dedicated practice. There was so much emphasis on the body and the poses that the rest of your life fell away. So the
Mm.
focus was entirely on your morning practice, and everything else around it was on the peripheral, which meant everything that you were doing outside of there, from the foods you were eating to the caffeine you were intaking to the relationships to what time you're going to sleep to what time you were waking up in the morning, all those things would impact your practice. And it meant making my life very, very, very small so
Mm.
that I could prioritize getting my leg behind my head every day and
Mm-hmm.
standing up from a backbend.
Mm.
But the reality is that, when your life, when that is your focus, I mean, it's not even the reality. That's just, you could even imagine just picturing it. Your life is extremely small. It really limited me
Mm-hmm.
in all my relationships. I mean, even my girlfriends, my friendships, because I wouldn't go anywhere. I wouldn't really do anything unless I could be home by
Mm.
8 and like in bed,
Wow.
and going out
Wow.
to dinner was always a challenge. So it's interesting because now at 41, two kids, very different time in my life, lots of different injuries. I like to think of my life as being at the center and my practices on the peripheral.
Oh, right, right,
It's
right.
just there kind of holding me as a container, but it's not
Yeah.
the like nexus that everything is surrounding.
Oh, I'm breathing. That gives me a little more like room and breathe and relief, like to hear it in that way. And
Mm,
what's interesting is hearing you describe that experience. It's reminding me of we had a former guest who's a author who wrote about her ballerina experience growing up,
mm,
and she was on the on that track, the professional track, and how again everything got very small. Everything was about how your body looked, how your I'm calling poses, but your posture, and it can become so obsessive and very toxic to one's self-image. Again, and I'm saying this very loosely for everyone. There's the pros and cons of all this, and it's like, how do we find balance? And I think that's when you said you went from one way to another, one extreme to another extreme. And in my experience, dealing with humans and being one myself, is that when we try to change something big, we usually take a full swing to the other side because we have to work so hard to switch whatever habit or behavior that that has been ingrained, and then it is a very slow trial and error slog to try to get to the middle.
mm. Well, I don't know the author. I would love to read her book, so I
Yeah.
don't want to make any presumptions.
Yes.
I can tell you that when my life was that small, I told people it was about the poses. That's what I was outwardly saying, but it was
Mm,
really, I'm a recovering anorexic. It was all control.
mhm.
It's all control. And
Mm,
and what I know of the ballet world from my friends that are professional dancers, there's a lot of that too. And it comes
mhm.
out in the perfect technique and the perfect
Right.
movement and how much are you weighing, and can you stand perfectly on point, or in our case, in the yoga tradition, like, can you get your leg behind your head, can you sit up easily, and but the reality is like, what are we actually trying to do? Well, it's such great fear of the unknown, which is the world and
Mhm,
living, and like,
mhm.
hello, parenting just like blew that lid off the
Right.
I don't even know what the saying would be, blew the
Right.
roof off the house. So it where, at least in my case, the earlier days of my partying and my acting out, and again, it's also correlated with my teens and very, very early 20s, but a lot of that was about being out of control, and then I swung
Mhm,
to the pendulum side of uber control. So
mhm.
it's finding that happy medium of letting in pleasure, letting in softness, but also still having a container, also still
Mhm,
having limits. And
mhm.
parenting has been one of the greatest places for me to really learn that and to see that, because
Right,
I can see
right.
it in how, I mean, it's not to say I'm like an expert by any means, but I watch it just in how I handle my kids and how I
Mhm.
handle myself. I mean, I talk
Right.
about that in the book too, that idea of limits and softness. But I think that's, at least in my case, I can tell you that's what it was. It was that
Yeah.
swing from out of control, which was its own fear response to dealing with the unknown, to uber control, uber control.
Yeah, that makes sense. And if any of us ever want a ultimate lesson in lack of control, just bring some children into your life.
Yes.
Right?
It's
Oh my gosh.
even
Yeah.
my sister, like, as the aunt, I'm like, spend a few hours with him, with my eldest. Like, here you go. You don't even have to, like, they don't even have to be legally yours.
Right.
It's just
Yeah.
bring some children into your life. It's really, it's a wild ride. And yeah.
Mhm. So tell us about the importance of self-compassion and self-acceptance and being in the moment as as central to the practice, and really, as you write about it, it's like central to the practice of health and living.
Well, I think just even wrapping up like the history, right? Because I thought I was being self-compassionate, and
Mm,
I thought that I was making choices that were healthiest for me. I mean, obviously my eating disorder was running rampant, and
Mm-hmm.
I was constantly torn, like going to OA meetings over Eaters Anonymous, and then showing up in front of the classroom and saying, oh, I practiced my mantras this weekend. I was my affirmations in front of the mirror. But I think at its root, what I thought I was doing was a practice of self-compassion. And it really took the getting into the mud and that being at my kind of breaking point to
Mm-hmm.
understand like what self-compassion actually is. And truly, the greatest ways I've ever learned self-compassion are through teaching other people and
Mm-hmm.
parenting my children, because
Mm-hmm.
it's a lot easier to be like, over my own shoulder and trying to impart all of these like expectations that are just completely unattainable, or how I speak to myself. It's a lot easier to be mean to myself than it is to an actual living, breathing being in front of you.
Right.
And I would even say my dogs, right? Like my dogs growing
Yeah.
up too, I think they also taught me some compassion. So, and especially when I have my kids or started to get pregnant, and just thinking about like, how am I talking to myself right now? Well, I'm telling the baby like, oh, I can't wait to meet you. And then I stand in the mirror and I'm like, oh, you look awful. How, like,
Right.
where is this disconnect? And
Mm-hmm.
how can we start to see ourselves with that same loving eye, that unconditional love and acceptance that we do everyone else that's
Mm-hmm.
closest to us?
How would you say that yoga, the practice of yoga, and we'll talk about the practice of yoga because I know a lot of people get overwhelmed by thinking what yoga is and what they have to
Yeah.
do to practice yoga. Um, how does the practice of yoga bring in and cultivate self compassion?
Well, it's a practice of deep listening if you're really listening. And that's kind of what happened when I very first started to do yoga, was that it was the first time I was like, whoa, like my soul was in my body. I was breathing in the present moment. I was moving my arm at the same time I was being asked to lift it. Like that was very different than how quickly I'd been living my life prior. And then of course, as I mentioned, and the years got on and I got much more hardcore, I was able to kind of bypass what I was feeling. So things felt good in my body, but my shoulder was screaming, but I'm like, that's okay. I'll still wrap it behind my back. I
Mm.
was starting to ignore certain signals. And what yoga has taught me over the years, and I think it's been about getting older. I think it's, truly it's about watching my body just change. Like I don't even think you need to have carried children to experience your body changing as the years go on. But it gets to a point where when you're moving your body on a day-to-day basis, and we can talk about what it is, right? Like yoga, you don't need to take your legs behind your head. Just simply lift your arms up. Like you can do that at home. Just lift your arms up and be with that. As you become more aware, you start to get more honest with yourself. Like, oh, well, I'm lifting my arms up, but this right one is actually kind of hurting right now. And oh, well, maybe when I lift my arms up, if I bend my elbows, it'll get a little bit higher. You just start to really get honest and truthful about what's happening in a physical level, so that off of the mat, you get more honest and truthful about what's starting to happen on an internal level, what we would say is
Mm.
intuition.
Mm-hmm. Mm. So cultivation on the mat brings on more awareness off the mat.
Yeah, 1000%.
Mm-hmm.
And like I don't even want to say on the mat anymore, honestly,
Yeah, yeah.
because
I taught myself there too. Yeah,
no, but I do it all the time. I mean, it's in
yeah,
the book. I say off
yeah,
the mat and or on the mat. Those exercises are in there. But the reason that I would maybe, if I did a rewrite now,
yeah,
the book's only
yeah.
been out for 2 months. But if I did a rewrite, it's because for some people that connection practice is when you're doing sports, when you're playing sports, or when you're out
Mm-hmm.
hiking, or for runners when you're
Right.
running. So it doesn't, or even for people that, simply sit, or painters, or, so whatever it is that you're doing, that flow state that is sometimes referred to, that
Yes.
brings you into the moment, that you are so present in whatever it is. And there is an embodiment aspect to it, even if you're just statically breathing. I think that's the thing that can then be the gateway into, okay, what am I actually feeling underneath that? What are the emotions underneath that? And starting to
Mm-hmm.
get really honest.
Yes. And I'm really glad you said that, because the idea of mat and studios does
Mm,
feel really restrictive. I know it always has for me, and I know many others. It's like, I don't do yoga, and it's the same way I spent years waiting to have enough time to meditate because of my notion of what meditation was. So fortunately, I finally got there, and I've been doing that for a long time, but I am aware that I have the same barrier in my mind about yoga. I have family members who do yoga. I've done yoga a few times, but the idea of a consistent yoga practice feels big. But what you write about and what you're saying is it actually isn't, and it's really accessible to all of us throughout the day.
yeah. I mean, even just like, you paused and took a big inhale earlier as we were talking. I can't remember which part we were at, but there was a moment where you caught yourself and you took a big breath. Like, I would dare to say that is yoga.
Mm-hmm.
I would dare to say when you're standing in line at Starbucks, or wherever you get your coffee, and you're waiting to get your coffee, and then you realize that your posture's a little bit off, and you kind of correct yourself, and ooh, I feel a little bit more energized just by standing a little taller. Like,
Mm-hmm.
that is its own form of yoga.
Mm-hmm.
But even on the more esoteric level, which is the like deep conversations with people that you love, or as we mentioned, the flow state, and all of that
Mm-hmm.
really does constitute yoga.
And that's when it gets back to what you were saying earlier. And I know a core of your meaning and practice is connection.
Hmm.
It's like connection to self, connection to other, and of course, connection to our children.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I mean, the connection part of it, and I'm actually really glad that you just said it in that order. Because I mean, maybe I would swap other and children, right? So children and then other, but
Right,
but
right.
connection to self has to be first, and a
Hmm.
lot of us have missed that memo.
Yes,
I mean,
yes.
especially, and I don't know as a dad, like how you're feeling pressure, but I know as a mother in the West, there is a lot of pressure to self-sacrifice and to make your
Hmm.
connection with your kids priority over everything else. And we know what happens, right? I mean, it's all those adages, right? You can't pour from an empty cup, and you got to put your own mask on first. So it is connection to self. And I would tell
Yeah.
you, I'm sure you've heard this, like, it's like it's not funny, but it's like a parable, which is like there was like a spiritual seeker who went to the meditating master and was like, I would love to start meditating. How long should I meditate for? And the master replies, oh, 15 minutes. And the seeker says, oh, I don't have 15 minutes. And then the master says, an hour. So it's like, we actually we gain more time by doing these practices. We
Yes.
gain deeper connections by taking the time for ourselves. We think like, oh, I'll push my meditation away, or I won't go to do that movement class that feels good, or I won't go for that walk because I need to be with my kids right now, not realizing that 1 hour, 10 minutes, 1 minute is
Yes.
actually going to make our connection better.
And you have a beautiful quote about that, which I'm going to read. Putting our needs aside does not make us better parents. The more disconnected we are from ourselves, the more disconnected we are from everyone else. It is impossible to be fully present with someone when you cannot be fully present with yourself. It is impossible to give someone your all if you have nothing to give. Right? And this is what you're describing, and this is as a um, trying to be always have tried to be a very present father. So I relate the dilemma of time, and there's time for work, there's time for family, home, kids, but like, no, you can't like have time for yourself. Like there's no time. And I know this is mothers in a very big way deal with this all the time, all day long. And the idea that no, you taking the time for yourself is essential for you, not only connecting to yourself, but being the kind of parent you want to be, you can't do that if you are not practicing self-care.
Hmm. There's a saying that like spirituality is a razor's edge. So that it always seems easier to skip my workout in the morning, to eat whatever foods I want to eat, to, not carve out that time to meditate. Those feel like the quote unquote easier paths, because maybe in the moment it is easier to hit snooze and keep sleeping and, do whatever it is. But the long term of that, you're going to be more affected, right? It's gonna be have more of a negative effect in the long term, making those choices. And I'm not knocking any of it. Like, I am all for the sleeping in and the
Yeah.
like eating whatever you want, but you know what I mean? It's the, you don't do the hard things. And the hard things with parenting could be setting a limit in a conscious way, like getting down on their level and having a conversation with them about something, as opposed to no, because it's my household, which is an easier route, quote unquote. But if we're looking at everything as a long game, and we're looking at, what are the seeds that we're planting and the footprints that we're leaving, as you say, then we realize that, the harder choice in the moment is actually queuing us up for this much more rich and serene existence.
Yes. And what you're reminding me of, so the hard things in the moment. So a colleague had this week sent me a podcast on patience. We were talking about it, and it's from a business leader. And in this podcast, the quote was, they were referencing a medical hospital, that on the wall it says for all of the interns and doctors, don't just do something, stand there. And that made me think of what you talk about in your book about the importance and how hard it is to not intervene with our kids, whether it's a physical moment with a sibling, whether it's at times I want to say a light safety moment, maybe something that, of course, as parents, we get worried about, but it's really, they're not in a life-threatening situation, and how hard it is to be intentional about letting things unfold, which is also part of mindfulness and yoga.
Yeah. Yeah, it's so funny. So there's one of the original co-owners of Yoga Works, which is that's the school I was trained in. My teacher, Mati Azrati, her former partner, his name is Chuck Miller. I just want to give him the shout out. But he always says you have to start by stopping. You have to start by stopping. And he would often start, most yoga classes, you're moving already, you're breathing. And he would often start people in what we call Tadasana, which is simply standing. So I love that. Stop doing something, just stand there. Yeah, I mean, I have to fully admit, when I wrote this, I wrote it as I was pregnant with my second. He was not out in this world, and he is like trying to kill himself at every corner. Like, at any chance, if there's a wire, it's wrapped around his neck. He's like, I turn for 3 seconds. So it's very hard to not intervene with him, and everything feels like an emergency. But this is when you come back to exactly what you were saying. It's the mindfulness practice. It's the intentionality. It's the willingness to, he's going to trip sometimes. He's going to trip and fall. I can't catch him every single time. I'm not going to let him play with wires, obviously. But the climbing up and down off the couch was a big one, because he was so unstable. And I would pad everything up, and then I'd be there. And then I realized, like, I wasn't being present with my other son. I wasn't being present with myself. Like, he has to have a little bit of space to kind of fall off, and he has to, and that actually is what helped him to learn how to climb back up. So, it's not just about our experience too. It's about giving our loved ones the dignity and the space for them to learn on their own as well, which is so hard.
So hard. So hard.
As mentioned, I like control. So I'm like, and now he's like a little, he's not the most graceful, I gotta say, but he gets up and down just fine, and he still falls down on his bum a lot of the times, but he's got to figure it out. I can't always be there, and I won't always be there.
You also wrote about something very important, and a topic we've had several times. It's come into several people's story on the show, and that is postpartum anxiety postpartum depression. And everyone knows about, well, more and more people know about postpartum depression. Finally, postpartum anxiety is getting more press and play. And as you cite, the research shows that new moms, 70 to 100% of new moms have intrusive, anxious thoughts about their kids. And how we have to both normalize this part of child rearing and also demystify it and destigmatize it so people understand what's going on when they're in a really scary place.
Yeah, and like there's intrusive thoughts, like the baseline, you're just a human being that's
Right.
caretaking and you're having your intrusive thoughts. There are the extreme intrusive thoughts, which obviously if there's ever an impulse or feeling like you're going to act on it, then that's when you need to seek advice. But when it's like I don't even want to set off a trigger, but you're walking down the street and you picture something, I
Right.
think that so much of that we get terrified by it. We're terrified by those thoughts that we cannot control. But learning that this is very normal, not only as a human being, but as a parent, which makes sense because if you think evolutionarily, like as, living in cave times or even prior to that when we were primates, you have to be able to be clocking everything that's going on, right? This is your job is to keep this thing alive. So, no wonder you're like thinking through like, oh, that chair's going to fall and that thing's going to spill. And, so it makes sense. It's just that they can be quite scary. But I do highly, highly recommend, if you're ever, and I am not a therapist, I'm not an expert, but, just as a mom that's had them myself and didn't tell people at first, talk to your providers and the people that you trust about them, because they can also like reflect back to you and say, oh, that's totally normal. It's totally normal to think that the knife that's on the counter is going to like get them in the bathroom that's, 7 feet away.
Right.
And the beautiful part about it that is the whole, crux of the book is like yoga can help with that. That's something that yoga can absolutely help with.
Yes. And that's where I was going, which is, so how did yoga help you through those intrusive thoughts?
Well, the way my anxiety works, it's both somatic. So I'm always feeling like I'm being dropped off a cliff. Just that like butterfly feeling down, in my solar plexus in the center of my tummy. Which, by the way, and like I am not a scientist, but I read recently is the blood leaving your digestive system, because you're in fight or flight, right? So much of that is that to go. Is that true? To go into your limbs, and I was like, oh, okay. Like I'm like, okay, guys, we're okay. Like stay there. Stay there. We can still work on the digestive system, but so I feel it somatically, and then of course the thoughts arise as well. But what I find that's really helpful is like somatically, obviously, like feeling my body on the floor. That's great. And that's part yoga too, is just like, okay, like feel my feet, focus on that instead, focus on, where's the top of my head right now, maybe even sometimes feeling into the anxiety and like tracking it, it reminds me of like Inner Space. Remember Dennis Quaid and Meg Ryan was like, and I'm like, oh, I can like feel it inside, like moving around. So that's one way the physical practice can help. But the mental practice is it, because you recognize the thought, you can then choose your next one. So the first one, we don't, unless you're like a meditating master in the Himalayas, like, it's most likely that you'll have these thoughts, they'll come up. It's that instantaneous reaction, as we call it. But the very next one, once you're aware of that, what's your next thought? And what are you choosing to think? So when it comes to intrusive thoughts, which are wild and sometimes horrific, I like to think, look at what's going on in my room and recite to myself something that is truly happening in this moment. Like, that chair is not fallen over. That chair is perfectly still. My son is on the other side of the room. That chair is perfectly still. My son's on the other side of the room. And I almost repeat it like a mantra to myself. And it doesn't matter if like, it's like, oh, the chair's going to fall. No, the chair is standing still. Oh, the chair is going to, like, some days it feels like that's my meditation practice where I'm literally like back and forth with my brain. I would rather have a day like that than a day where I am just in horror about the chair falling down and feeling completely helpless. And then in time, you have these days where you're like, okay, the chair is there. The chair is not falling over.
Right.
He's over there. And then like hours can go by, you know?
So really, again, rooted in present,
Mm.
because we know intrusive thoughts are almost always anxious thoughts. And we know
Yes.
that anxious thoughts are about a future event or situation that has yet to occur. And so we often say that all worry and anxiety exists in a future that has not yet happened. And so the presence, getting back to your root, getting back to right now, grounds you in this fleeting present moment.
Yeah. And isn't that like everything, right? It
It's
sounds so
everything.
easy.
It's
And
everything.
it's so simple, but it is. It's
Yeah.
everything. It's being in this moment. And it's, you know, as humans with the frontal cortexes and,
Mhm.
you know, it's like, it's really, it's challenging,
Yes.
but
Yes.
like, that's why I love yoga and mindfulness practices, because
Hmm.
that's why I need them. You know, we just anchor me.
And I feel like mindfulness and yoga meet with a word you just said, mantra.
Yeah.
And say a little bit about the power of mantras in our daily life.
So there's the like mantras, we know it like in the yoga tradition, like chanting the syllable Om, or often it's a sentence or a sacred syllable. And that's, you know, generally in the Sanskrit language. But colloquially, we use mantras. That's the same term that's been used to talk about those repetitive thoughts and the things that we say to ourselves over and over again. I feel like it's synonymous. And like, again, you know, I'm not an expert on it, but affirmations and mantras are kind of the same thing. So the idea is through repetition, even if you don't necessarily believe it at first, but through repetition internally or speaking out loud, you can literally start to change your thoughts. So just, you know, referring to the chair example, it's like my son is safe. My son is over here and safe. That's how I start to transform the fear of the chair falling. Just like when I stand in front of the mirror and I'm super pregnant and I'm like, you look beautiful right now.
Hmm.
You look beautiful right now. And I may not believe it in that moment, but the more I say it and the more eye contact I hold, everything starts to transform and I do start to believe it. I start to truly believe it. It's like it
Hmm.
changes the chemistry.
Yeah.
So it's there's something about the words of it. I mean, you know, the Sanskrit language is different because it's like it's believed to access the divine, and you know, there is something really powerful. And I grew up in the Jewish tradition, so like when you go into synagogue and you're singing prayers, like, you know, or whatever you do to access that higher power. But I also think humans and words can have a very powerful effect. It doesn't have to
Hmm.
be a language. It doesn't have to be sung. It's just the power of your thoughts and of your speech, and that you can
Hmm.
change your whole experience.
Yes. As we are winding down towards the parent footprint moment question, I have a two-parter question for you, which is, how did writing this book impact you? And what do you hope the impact will be on your readers?
I love that. I mean, I wrote it for myself. Like, let's just be real. You know, I wrote it because I love books and I love words, as you know, I'm sure you can glean from
Yes.
from the conversation so far.
Yes.
And I wasn't finding what I needed, so I went to experts and research, and I was like, let's just bring it together. So I wrote it for me.
Hmm.
What's so interesting is that, you know, I've reread it 1,000 times, right? I've had to reread it for the rewrites. I've had to reread it for the audiobook. I've reread it when I'm reading passages. And every time I read it, I'm reminded and I learn again and again and again. So even getting to talk to you about mantra, I realized like, oh, I wasn't being very kind to myself this morning
Mm.
because I'm going to a concert, which is very unlike me as like the mom. I stay home all the time and I'm going to see Beyonce. I'm just going to say it, which means
Nice.
I'm away from my kids all afternoon, and I was beating myself up for it. And just in this conversation between you and me, I'm reminded, like, and I'm thinking all these horrific thoughts, like, what if I never
Right.
make it home? And,
Mm-hmm.
like, even just, what if I don't get home till 2? And then, it's like, that's horrific. But it just reminds me the power that we have, and
Yeah.
coming back to the basics of the breath, the body, and working with your mind. So that's, to me, it's just that continually coming home
Mm-hmm.
and continually connecting again
Mm-hmm.
to myself,
Yes.
to something bigger, and to my kids.
Nice.
And as far as what I hope for those reading it, I wanted to write something that gave people permission, that made them feel good. So many parenting books, and there's brilliant ones out there, but a lot of them just made me feel worse about myself and where I was at, and or just very behind. And I wanted a
Mm-hmm.
book that was like, let's connect to what's happening in the moment. Let's connect to you. Let's connect to your family, because we are the best parent for our kids. And take a moment, like we said in the very beginning, to
Yeah.
pause and look at how far you've come. Look at where you are. Look at this life.
Yes. Yes. And your book does that. Your book does that.
Thank you. I hope so. Thank you.
All right. I'm going to read one last quote before the parent footprint moment question, because I love this. Okay. We are practicing yoga every time we remember to take a deep breath during our child's meltdown. We are practicing yoga every time we're able to calm our nervous system after we've had a scare at the playground or have had it out with our teenager. We are practicing yoga every time we observe our mind wandering from the reality of the present towards some non-existent future and are able to re-anchor back into the truth of the now.
I took an exhale just listening to
Yeah,
it.
that's beautiful. And everyone listening, you didn't realize how much you actually have already started your yoga practice.
Exactly.
So this is a
Yeah, not even
foundation and a
started.
leap up.
You're an expert.
An
If you're
expert,
listening,
exactly,
if you're
exactly.
listening to a parenting podcast, I would
Yes,
like to say you are an expert. Since
oh,
I wrote the
yeah.
book, we actually had a big scare at the playground, and it was
Mm.
really cool to. It was actually at a museum. My son fell 2 stories and cracked the back of his head open. He's fine, but
Whoa,
it was like full ambulance CT, really scary. And it
wow.
was really cool to see how my practice could help me in that moment. Because it was one thing when he was falling off the couch, and this isn't the clumsy
Yeah,
one. This
yeah.
is actually my climber. It was one thing to have those, like, a scare at the playground, but when I reread that, when you reread that to me, I'm like, oh, right, and being able to really use my practice, and it, like, I couldn't have gone through that day were it
Mm,
not for my meditation practice. Had I not woken up much earlier than everybody and done some kind of a practice that morning, some
mm-hmm,
kind of sitting, I'm not
mm,
sure. I'm not sure how the day would have gone, but it makes me so grateful for these tools. And again, I don't want to overwhelm people that they have to start all these other tools. I think we're just doing them. We know
yeah,
without knowing
yeah,
it, right? Which is the breathing, feeling your body, noticing where you are
yeah.
in space. Like, I'm so grateful to have those in my back pocket to be able to draw upon. And I hope
Mm,
everybody starts to
mm-hmm,
use them, even maybe just today, just
yeah.
the deep breath, just see what that does for you.
Hmm. I am glad he is okay. I cannot
Thank
even
you.
imagine. I am
Yeah.
imagining, and I'm trying not to imagine. So I am glad he's okay.
Well, I do want to say, like, quick update, which is that we went back about a month and a half later, and my husband climbed it with him so that he was behind
Mm,
him and holding him. And I
mm-hmm,
actually just wrote about this in my newsletter this morning, which is like the accomplishment, his, like, conquering, and how he
mm-hmm.
felt about himself on the other side of it. Now, none of it was worth it. None of it was worth
Right,
the, like, ambulance bill,
right,
or, the
right.
stitches, the staple in the head, or
Yeah.
any of those things. But there was this, he really culled some beautiful gold out of the experience, and I'm really proud of him for climbing up. And again, it goes, like, back to what we're talking about, like letting our kids make mistakes and learn from
Yeah.
them,
Mm-hmm,
and just getting to see his growth from that. And I was worried he wasn't going to climb again, but he did
mm-hmm.
that, and he's, like, back to climbing like nothing happened. It's remarkable.
That is remarkable.
Yeah.
Okay, here we go. Parent footprint moment question. Tell us about a time that you became aware of yourself as an individual as a parent or even an awareness of your own parents, and that new awareness had a positive impact on your life, your kids, and or those you love?
Okay. And I told you I knew there was a question. I didn't read it, even though you sent it to me in advance. I think we say like my awareness of me as a parent. Let's
Mm-hmm.
talk about that.
Okay.
Definitely. So I got pregnant first before why I had a pregnancy when I was younger that unfortunately we had to terminate. But I got pregnant right before we got pregnant with Jonah, that we lost the baby. That was, I mean, motherhood was always this kind of like esoteric concept of like, first of all, it didn't even feel like anything that was going to be on my path. It was like my friends are the moms, and these neighbors, the mom friends are the moms. It didn't feel like it was part of my wheelhouse. But the second I got pregnant when we were trying, I became mother.
Mm.
And I wanted to take care of this thing inside of me. It turned out it was a girl, but I didn't know at the time. And everything changed in how I took care of myself, how I looked at myself, how I talked to myself. I mean, it's what I was saying earlier about like, I felt horrible, obviously, because we were in the first trimester when I lost the baby, but being like realizing like, oh, there's someone inside of you that can hear what you're saying. And that has completely changed how I now approach everything, because what I realized, and this is actually a teacher of mine named Allie Hamilton, who was based in LA, had once said this, which is that we get pregnant and we're like taking care of this thing inside of us, not realizing that like we're inside of us. Like the baby is
Mm-hmm.
then born, but we are inside of us still. I can still take care of myself in that way. And that was a hugely transformational moment. And I realized like I've actually been very mothering in many ways. I just didn't have a label for it, but it was having something inside of my body
Mm-hmm.
and really listening to it in a deep way that I hadn't with myself in a very long time, as mentioned.
Mm-hmm.
That was transformational for me. And
Mm.
now being able to do that still for myself, even when it's in conflict with what my kids want, that's really challenging. But it's
Mm-hmm.
that, okay, well, okay, mother, I need to go to this concert. I don't need to go to this concert tonight. That's not a good example. But like, often I need to eat this food right now. That's a big one, right?
Yeah.
I need to eat right now. I know you're losing it. And I know that, you want to get to the park. And I wouldn't say I know you're losing it, but I would reflect, I know you want to get to the park right now, but feeding my deeper needs, knowing that I am ultimately taking care of them, that's where that all comes from. There's a lot of people that don't have the privilege to carry. So I don't want to say that it was specifically about carrying my children, but it was just like when that desire to have a kid was sparked, I became mother, and I
Mm.
started caring for everyone and everything in this much deeper and
Mm.
more connected way.
And yourself as well,
Yeah,
because you were in you as well.
exactly. And we are
Yeah.
all, right? We are all
Yes.
the little kids inside of ourselves. That's
Yeah. Yeah. Sara, thank you for sharing yourself with us today and in your book and in all of your media and your blogs. And you are so active out there, putting yourself out there, and just inspiring us all to be real, to be authentic, to care for ourselves, and to just keep moving through this messy journey of life and parenthood with compassion.
yeah. Well, thank you so much. Thank you for everything you do. Thank you for having me on here. I am very grateful to be officially connected now. And yeah,
It's official. It's
it's
official.
official. It's official, and it's hopeful. The more that I talk to incredible people, and the more resources that I hear are out there, and the more that I learn for myself, I'm like, oh wait, I should have been listening to that years ago, right? But I'm glad that I come to all of it when I do, and just thank you so
Yeah.
much for all you're
Yeah.
doing for our parents.
Tell everyone not only where to find your book, your blogs, your everything you're doing.
I think the one stop shop would probably just be my website, which is Sarah Ezrin Yoga, and I tend to put up, because I write for a bunch of different outlets. But I put a lot of them up on there. And then I think I'm most active on Instagram, Sara Ezrin Yoga as well. But I am also on TikTok, and I'm everywhere. So you can find me anywhere. I'm about to go back on tour actually next week, which I was
nice.
I was hesitating saying, because I don't know. I assume this will air well past those dates, but yeah, we are going around and doing some tours in different yoga spaces and wellness spaces. So keep an eye out for that.
Awesome. And also, we didn't talk about, but everyone, please check out you have a limited podcast series with amazing guests that I did find on your website. So that is another offering that we did not even refer to. So you guys go. There's so much there on Sara's site, and she's doing so much. And as you can tell, she's very approachable and loves to connect.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you. You should be my PR person.
We'll talk after the show.
Yeah, okay. Exactly.
Yeah. Everyone, thanks for listening. Thanks for being a part of our community. Thank you for your 5-star reviews. Please share this episode with everyone that you think and know will benefit. You know what I'm going to ask you to do. Try to be that person you want your child to become, and ask yourself the guiding question I ask myself each day: what footprint do you want to leave? This has been a Peters and Rossi production. Parent Footprint with Dr. Dan is produced by Laura Rossi. Our engineer is Phil Rossi. Theme music is Strummerman, composed and performed by Pro Tunes. Artwork is by Garrett Ross. Follow us on Instagram and Facebook at Parent Footprint Podcast, and on Twitter at Dr. Dan Peters. For more information, go to exactlyrightmedia.com.